Wow, it's really bright. Can I get those lights turned down just a little bit? Seriously. I know I'm standing between you and free drinks, and thanks, Rory, for mentioning crunchies. Now everybody wants to leave a little bit more. So I'll get through this as quickly as I possibly can. I have not rehearsed this. In fact, this opportunity gave me a chance to think through some things that I've been going through in my life. So there's no rehearsal. I'll try to move as fast as I can, but I think you'll appreciate this. This is a story of a man. Let's see if I can get this going here. It's a story of a man, and more specifically, I think it's the story of men. I think this is a challenge that all men are faced with at some point in their life. And when I say men, I mean guys and gals, mankind generally. But we're all faced with this challenge. And I certainly was faced with it as well just a few years ago. You see, I was the guy who did everything right. I wore the right clothes, I drove the right car, I went to the right school, I said the right thing, smoked cigars at the right time, drank scotch at the right time. I did everything at the right time. And you might say, well, where did you learn how to do that? Well, I went to the right school, and when I was at the right school, they asked me to pick my business hero. It was business school. They said, pick a person that you would really like to model your career after. And I picked Alfred P. Sloan, and it was the biggest mistake of my life. How many of you know who Alfred P. Sloan is? I wish I could see your hands. Not many. Well, Alfred P. Sloan is the genius behind General Motors. He's actually the genius behind much of industrial America. I would argue that Alfred P. Sloan is the philosophical wizard that has created the America that we know. A lot of my friends know that I throw the term around widget maker a lot. I don't use that to be offensive, but I believe that people like Alfred P. Sloan turned a lot of us into widget makers. And so I picked Alfred P. He's the modern founder of management by number, by the way. He's the guy who really started the movement about, how many widgets did you put out today? How many things did you make? And that our worth in life is only limited to those numbers. And I'll argue that that's not true at all. So I found myself in this really precarious position of kind of being lost, even though I thought I was doing everything right. So when a person is faced with that, they have to sometimes look in unusual places for answers to those questions. And I certainly did. I found them there. I didn't necessarily look in unusual places, but I found them there. And G.K. Chesterton, if you've ever looked at my Facebook page, I quote him a lot. I love this quote, and I just came across it reading some obscure essay that he wrote. He said, "Poets have been mysteriously silent on the subject of cheese." And it took me it's one of those kind of epiphany moments where you look at it and you say, what the hell does he mean? But then I realized what he meant after I read the rest of the way through the essay. And then the second thing, I was running one day, trying to stay in shape and do as Rory tells me. And I was listening to Hypnotize by Biggie Smalls, by the notorious B.I.G. And there's a lyric in that song that says, "Papa's been smooth since days of Underoos." And I kept running and I said, wow, that's really deep. Now, I could end the story here, and maybe the organizers would like me to, but I'm not going to. Because I have to explain to you, what was this thing that was missing? I told you I was the guy who did everything right. But I had become an asshole. I mean, literally had become an asshole. I forgot a very important thing in my life. I forgot that I could fly. I forgot that I could slay giants. I forgot how to play with my kids. Shit, I almost forgot I had kids. The most tragic thing in my life is when I decided to follow Alfred P. Sloan. So imagine the possibilities. I am arguing here today, and I think we've heard a lot of people argue this point. I really like Sir Robinson, I don't remember his first name, Sir. And he talks about the importance of imagination in our life. And we have become, as a society, the most practical human race that has ever graced the face of the earth. And Alfred P. Sloan, come on. Alfred P. Sloan is the most practical of men. Now, he had done remarkable things, and many practical men do remarkable things. But there's something missing in practical men. There was something missing in me. And when you read the first quote there from Henry Ford II, under his leadership, General Motors developed from a loosely organized group of companies into the presently highly efficient giant corporation. Well, I agree with most of that. We all know that General Motors isn't a highly efficient organization. But he did something remarkable. He took all these little companies and he turned it into one big company. And that's a great accomplishment. But his real practical side is captured by his biographer, Edwin Black, who said, for Sloan, motorizing the fascist regime in Germany that was expected to wage a bloody war in Europe was the next big thing and a spigot of limitless profits for GM. That's what practicality will get you. That's what too much practicality will get you. It will get you to a point where you don't care whether you're doing a good thing or a bad thing. You're just worried about the bottom line. I'll tell you frankly, I'm so sick and tired of hearing people say, all I care about is the bottom line. Those people are cowards. It's the easiest thing in the world to just care about the bottom line. Well, it's actually the second easiest thing in the world. I'll explain the easiest thing in just a second. So this is a great thing that I think I used to counterbalance that. Also, by my man, Chesterton. He may be mad, and I'm sorry to the scientists who are here today. He may be mad, but there's a method in his madness. There nearly always is method in madness. It's what drives men crazy, being methodical. We have a very common saying in the American lexicon, and that's the mad scientist. We do not have a common saying that says the mad poet. Too much practicality drives men mad. It almost drove me mad. So imagine the possibilities on the other side of the coin, where we have too much imagination. Crazy Uncle Joe. Now, I'm not trying to pick on that Joe. It was just a good picture. But we all have a crazy Uncle Joe. We all have that guy who shows up to our family reunions and says, hey, man, I got the next great idea. And every year it's the next great idea. And he never, ever does anything. So you have a lot of great imagination. But if you don't ever do anything with it, it never goes anywhere. And my good friend Cam Ganas, who's here somewhere, there's Cam right there. Cam very often says this very thing: ideas without action are just fantasy. And I couldn't agree with anything more. An overly imaginative man is foolish. An overly practical man is dangerous. So imagine the terrible possibilities. When you finally do get a man, or again, I'm using that in the broadest context of mankind generally, that does have that balance, has a very active imagination, that is also very good at practically implementing it. Those, by the way, that is the most powerful thing on the face of the earth, is a person who has a good balance between their imagination and their practicality. They build the empires. They're the ones that come up with the great cures. They're the ones that do those things. They're the ones who build colliders in Switzerland. Okay? Someone had to dream that up. And then somebody had to make it. And so when you have that balance, whether it's within one man or within a group of people, you have to have that balance in order to achieve great things. But we're all challenged with the point that if we were ever to reach that balance, what would we do with it? And here's an example of someone who reached that balance and used it in a very bad way. Read the quotes. Just read the imaginative quote. By the skillful and sustained use of propaganda, one can make a people see even heaven as hell. That doesn't sound like a very good use of imagination. Here's a guy who decided that the Aryan race, I'm not Aryan. I didn't get to fit in that class. Okay? That the Aryan race was the right thing. That was in his imagination. We all know that that's not true. But this isn't something that this man imagined. And he set about practically to make it happen. So a balance of imagination and practicality can be a very bad thing. His other quote here, anyone who sees and paints a sky green and fields blue ought to be sterilized. I wouldn't let Hitler sterilize my children, because my children sometimes see a sky that's green and fields that are blue. So really kind of a nasty practical side to him as well. So again, a counterbalance to this as I was thinking through all of this stuff, and again, putting this presentation allowed me to put these thoughts together. And one of my favorite quotes is from Gandalf the Grey in the Fellowship of the Ring. And David, I appreciate you bringing that up earlier. When Frodo's trying to give the ring to Gandalf, and Gandalf says, I dare not take it, Frodo. Understand that I would use this ring from a desire to do good, but through me it would wield a power too great and terrible. Gandalf understood that there's this real power in this balance, and that we have to be really careful about it. And C.S. Lewis, another one of my favorite authors, I think puts it in a way that I like it the most, and that is, the great sinners and the great saints are made of the same material. They just apply it very differently. So we have to be really careful about how we use this balance. In that sense, imagine the wonderful possibilities. Imagine the wonderful things that people can do when they have that balance. Ben Franklin is the guy that I hold up as kind of the marker for this type of thing. He's, a rabid inventor, revolutionary, very good at governing people, the whole 9 yards. And his imagination and the imagination of his colleagues was, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with a certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now that's a good use of imagination. We would all say that that's a positive use of imagination. And then his practical side, something we've heard throughout the day today. Do not fear mistakes. You're going to fail. We're going to know failure. Continue to reach out. That's a positive practical side of a man that was, in my opinion, one of the greatest. So what is the larger point? The larger point is this. Logic will take you from A to B. To build the Hadron Collider, you have to start somewhere. And then you have to end somewhere. A circle. Imagination will take you everywhere. So if you don't have imagination, you can't build a collider. So you have to have that balance. And Albert Einstein, and I've been reading a lot of his stuff lately, understands that better than just about anyone I've ever looked at. The second point is, once you reach that balance, be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. I think, if we were to go back to Germany in the 1940s, or in the 1930s, there was an entire country, maybe not everybody, but an entire country who embraced the imagination of one man. And I bet you, if you were to go and ask them in hindsight, and somebody may have, that they regretted that decision, much the way that I regretted following Alfred P. Sloan. So, back to cheese. So, what is this point about cheese, Matt? Great ideas, but what about cheese? Well, cheese, and I finally had a chance to understand what Chesterton meant about cheese. And he says that cheese is the essential human experience. That no matter where you go on earth, there's always a local cheese. Okay, there's cheese I go to Traverse City, and they have this at Black Star Farms Winery. They have a raclette cheese, and I always go up there. It's a locally formulated, a locally imagined cheese that's handcrafted by the people who live there. Now, it could be wine, it could be cider, it could be any other thing. But cheese represents that very essence of who we are as people. It's something that we think about, it's something we formulate, and then it's something that we make. And even in today's global economy, you still find local cheeses everywhere. So I think that really represents who we are and what we try to do as human beings. The second piece here is Papa's been smooth since days of Underoos. Well, Papa probably didn't mean it this way, but I took it this way. That Papa had something when he was in his Underoos, and that he still has that. There's a connection point from when he was in Underoos to where he is when he wrote the lyrics to this song. What was the thing that Papa drug with him from his days of Underoos? It was his lyrics, it was his beats, it was his ideas, it was his rhymes. He hadn't, for all of the education, for all the right things that I had done in life, Biggie Smalls had done one thing much more importantly than I had, and that was he never forgot about his imagination. I was so quickly trying to get out of my Underoos, and I think very many of us are very quickly trying to get out of our Underoos. But Papa knew that he had something from when he was in his Underoos that he needed to keep with him. So what is the thing about cheese and Underoos? Well, they're both messy. They both are potentially messy and smelly. If you make cheese, who's ever made cheese here? Few people. Making cheese is a messy experience. And you might make smelly cheese. We all know, some cheeses are pretty smelly. And if you have kids, you know there's a real potential for Underoos to be messy and smelly. So those are easy. Those are kind of givens. The thing about cheese and Underoos that maybe we don't know is that they're very risky. If you're going to make cheese, you got to formulate some cheese. You got to get some ingredients, and the cheese might taste like dirt, and you wasted all that money, and nobody wants to buy your cheese. So making cheese is risky. And my wife had to talk me out of this because I was going to come up with a pair of basketball pants. I was just going to rip them off and have a pair of Underoos on my wife. So that's probably not a good idea. But if any of us had showed up in a pair of Underoos, how risky is that? So if you go with the correlation with me, the correlation of imagination to Underoos, I think we'll all agree that being imaginative is a very risky proposition. That if you're ever sitting at your company and you put an idea out on the table, invariably there's something in your head that says, man, someone's going to make fun of this. Or someone's going to shoot this down. So wearing Underoos and being imaginative is a very risky proposition. And that's one of the things I think we've heard today that we have to get over. And I really appreciated Brian's talk about the institutional nature of that, and schools in particular. So I'd ask you to take a walk with me. And this may be a little hard for me, because I invested so much time in being Mr. Right that I forgot whether I was being Mr. Good. So I'm going to walk into the cemetery here where Alfred's plot is. He died in 1966, by the way. So I've been dealing with a ghost all of these years. And I want to just say simply to Alfred, thank you. And I think the people of Michigan thank you. You've given us a hell of a ride, 100 years. You've taught us a lot of lessons. You've brought us lots of good things. But it's time for us to go home now. It's time for us to find our Underoos and make some cheese. Thank you very much.